Hello and welcome back to the recap. Today we scour the grimy and gritty world of Nosgoth and uncover how a young nobleman was faced with a choice that would reshape the world in a story beyond time and place. Of course, I'm talking about Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain. In order to understand the rich lore of the Legacy of Kain, we have to go way back, so grab yourself a drink and sit back as we uncover the events that led to the corruption of the Pillars and Nosgoth's downfall. Naturally, this explanation will contain massive spoilers not only for this installment but for the whole series, so be advised. Let's get started. All the way back in the ancient times, the world of Nosgoth was inhabited by three sapient species: the Hilden, the Ancients, and humans. The Hilden were a technologically adept race bound to material mastery and science like sorcery, while the Ancients were powerful, mystically gifted, winged, angel-like beings who lived under the guidance of a vast alien entity known only as the Elder God. This so-called Elder God perceived existence as a wheel of fate. This basically meant souls would be born and they would live and die only to return to an eternal cycle. A cycle both the Hilden and the Ancients served, some willingly and others not. This balance would eventually be broken as the Hilden discovered that the Wheel of Fate was not a natural order but a system designed by this very Elder God so he could feed on souls. They finally understood reincarnation didn't offer enlightenment or transcendence, it rather erased identity and consumed essence. The Hilden then rejected this doctrine and started seeking ways to immortality without spiritual submission, in an attempt to escape the Elder God's Wheel of Fate. Since the Ancients were devout followers of the Elder God, to them this was the ultimate form of blasphemous heresy that threatened the cosmic balance. Thus began the Ancients' Hilden War that would last for a millennium. The Ancients could not defeat the Hilden through simple warfare, so eventually they enacted a devastating act of metaphysical cruelty. Using a vast ancient magic, they banished the Hilden into a demon dimension, cutting them off from the world of Nosgoth entirely. In order to seal them in and to stabilize the world, the Ancients created a lock system to this demon realm, which were of course the iconic Pillars of Nosgoth. The pillars were colossal towering pylons reaching endlessly into the sky that served as anchors of reality, binding the Hilden and maintaining the natural laws of the world. There were 9 pillars and each of them was tied to a specific aspect of existence, sustained by a living guardian. The pillars were that of the mind, dimension, energy, conflict, nature, time, states, death, and at the center stood the balance pillar, the crucial one. It ensured harmony among all others. However, the pillars came at a cost. They required a sacrifice. As each guardian was mystically bound to the pillar from birth, upon their death the pillar would remain stable only if a new guardian arose. What the Ancients didn't count on, however, is that the Hilden would manage to lay a so-called blood curse on them before being banished. A curse so terrible that would ultimately be the downfall of the whole race. The curse first and foremost made the Ancients immortal, which meant they couldn't die a natural death anymore, and that effectively ripped them from the Wheel of Fate, as their souls did not pass through the spectral realm anymore. This subsequently made the Elder God abandon them, revealing they were nothing more than a food source to him. In his eyes, they were now parasites and abominations that prevented the wheel from turning. The blood curse also turned the Ancients into bloodthirsty beasts as they had to consume human blood in order to maintain their physical strength and mental stability. Essentially, they became vampires. Next came sterility, rendering them unable to procreate, and finally came degeneration, ensuring they would decay into repugnant monstrosities over generations. It was a vengeance served extremely cold, and it worked. The curse slowly took effect, and the Ancients gradually lost their wings and started to devolve. Their culture fractured as they became fewer, weaker, and more desperate. Over time they realized the pillars might outlast them, so in a desperate attempt to preserve the Hilden prison, they made a fateful decision to turn the pillars over to humans, who could reproduce endlessly, always ensuring the next generation of pillars' guardians. This very fact made the humans ideal caretakers in the eyes of these beings that were now vampires. However, humans lacked the spiritual resilience to bear the pillars' burdens, so soon they would suffer instability, obsession, and madness. Their mortal minds would snap under the weight of the immortal responsibility. Also, humans had no insight into the Hilden threat. They guarded the pillars blindly, unaware that they were maintaining a boiling prison. For this very reason, the vampires would kidnap the newly appointed guardians and turn them into vampires as well. Along with that, the more the Hilden curse took its effect, the less did the degenerating vampires care about the pillars and the guardians. They did not see the pillars as the Hilden prison anymore, but rather as an ironic monument to their downfall, as they now sustained the system that allowed the Hilden curse to persist. These two things led to extreme tensions and distrust between the vampires and the humans, who had enough and decided something had to be done. So the Circle of the Nine formed an elite monastic order of the warrior priests called the Sarafan Brotherhood. Their sacred duty was the protection of humans and especially the Pillar Guardians. But very soon they became an Inquisition order committed to purging the land of all vampires while taking complete stewardship of the Pillars. Anyway, with this strife plaguing the surface, the Hilden too were not entirely powerless. Over centuries they learned patience and found ways to influence Nosgoth from beyond the dimensional barrier, until eventually they saw their opening. They understood that they could not destroy the pillars directly, as the pillars were metaphysical anchors designed to resist brute force, magic, and even time manipulation. But they did have one flaw: their dependence on now completely human guardians. So the Hilden shifted strategy. Instead of attacking the pillars, they sought to corrupt the keepers. Among the Circle of Nine, one guardian stood uniquely vulnerable: Mortanius, the Guardian of Death. As the Guardian of Death and a person who conversed with spirits and oversaw the passage of souls, he walked a thin line between life and oblivion. This placed him closer to the Elder God's wheel of fate than any other guardian. He saw countless souls sacrificed to preserve a system that did not heal the world. He witnessed the Guardians suffering through an unrelenting demand for obedience. And most importantly, he saw that the humans were failing as guardians. So naturally, over time, he began to question the justice of the pillars. This was the crack in the system the Hilden decided to exploit. They subtly infiltrated Mortanius' mind through thoughts, intuition, and visions, framing themselves as liberators. They offered solutions to problems Mortanius already perceived, and as they ultimately promised freedom from the Elder God's cycle, Mortanius was convinced this was the way to fix Nosgoth permanently. Now, the important thing is that around this time, a maiden named Ariel was the guardian of the Balance Pillar, the crucial one. Ariel was compassionate, idealistic, and deeply committed to the pillar's purpose, and unlike Mortanius, she still believed the system could work. Her counterpart was the Mind Guardian, Nupraptor, with whom she shared a profound romantic relationship. As the Guardian of Mind, Nupraptor was uniquely empathetic, emotionally attuned, and sensitive to psychic disturbance. Together, Ariel and him formed the emotional heart of the Circle. This, however, made them a perfect target for the Hilden, as they understood that killing Ariel would do even more damage than finding a way to destroy the Soul Pillar. Her death would shatter balance, break Nupraptor's mind, spread corruption within the Circle, and destabilize the Hilden prison. A cruel, cold strategy born from centuries of torment, festering rage, and thirst for vengeance. As Mortanius completely succumbed to the Hilden's influence, he confronted Ariel at the pillars and struck her down with necromantic power, killing her instantly. Ariel gave no resistance as she trusted Mortanius and was completely blindsided with his vile act. As soon as she fell, the Balance Pillar cracked and Nupraptor felt her death immediately. Being the guardian of the mind, his consciousness was intertwined with Ariel's more deeply than others, so her murder tore through him like a blade. Nupraptor then succumbed to endless denial as he refused to accept a world in which Ariel could die so senselessly. His mind was destroyed and the fracture echoed through the empathic bond connecting the guardians. This was the moment the corruption of Nosgoth truly began. As soon as Mortanius murdered Ariel, the grip the Hilden held over him weakened, and the horror of what he had done came crashing down. Because in the end, Mortanius was not a monster, just a man who let himself be used by a darker, more potent power. Racked with guilt, Mortanius attempted to atone, but the damage was irreversible. The pillars were cracked, the Circle was unstable, and Hilden prison was already weakening. In his attempt to restore balance, Mortanius' desperation grew, and his next act would be the one of colossal significance. Now that we set up the world history, we can move 30 years forward when the actual game begins. In Blood Omen, you assume the role of a young nobleman named Kain, and the story starts on a cold night as you're traveling far from the safety of your hometown, seeking glory and being a pretentious piece of shit. Anyway, you enter a tavern in the village of Zeekstrul in need of nourishment, but the barkeep is closing and isn't fazed by your gold or status, so he kicks you out.
I stay open for no man in these dark times. Things come with the night that no sane man would welcome.
From this conversation alone, we can see that you are a wealthy, privileged, arrogant, and vain noble snob who knew very little hardship in life, but that's all about to change real soon in the most unexpected way possible. As you exit the tavern, a band of brigands attack you without any context. You try to fight them off, but are outnumbered and struck down. The last thing you feel is a cold blade piercing your heart as one of the cutthroats performs a finishing move. Eternal darkness was not meant for you, so you wake up in the realm of the dead, and the only thing you can think about is vengeance. Your wish just might come true as Mortanius, the very guardian of death, approaches and offers you a choice: to embrace death and lie in your grave forgotten, or to rise again with the strength to exact your vengeance.
I didn't care if I was in heaven or hell. All I wanted was to kill my assassins.
Full of bloodthirsty rage, you naturally pick the latter, and Mortanius resurrects you. Of course, the resurrection came with a price. You did not return as a man, but as a vampire, a living dead. The intent of Mortanius' intervention will be revealed by the end, but the only thing you know for now is confusion and a newfound hunger. You exit your crypt and are prompted to murder and drink blood. As you do so, it is revealed that you were no less a vampire while you were human, only now you have the power to enact selfish horror upon others. You revel in every life you extinguish, caring for none other than your personal gain. Even though you're cut off from the world of men, even though the very sunlight sears your skin, you embrace your curse as a means to an end for now and head to the village of Zeekstrul. Very soon you find those who wronged you and relish in their fear and suffering as you strike them down one by one.
Their sneering faces were forever etched upon my memory. I had crossed death for this moment. My mind was empty save for one thought: I would kill.
Nothing tastes sweeter than revenge, so you go to the nearby tavern and murder the bartender as well, who denied you rest and nourishment that fatal night. As the dopamine hit fades, you realize you found no peace but rather broadened your hunger for vengeance. Things get confusing as Mortanius starts messing with your mind and tells you that the lowlives you exacted vengeance upon were merely the instruments of your demise, but not the cause. He prompts you to search further answers at the foot of the Pillars of Nosgoth. So, without any logical direction in life at this point, you oblige. The land of Nosgoth is brutal and unforgiving, but your vampire powers allow you to make short work of almost anything that crosses your path. You reach the magnificent Pillars of Nosgoth and are approached by a wandering spirit bound to the pillars, as the corruption made it unable to pass on. This is the ghost of very Ariel, the Balance Guardian Mortanius had slain. She implores you to stay your weapon and explains how her lover Nupraptor, the guardian of the mind, had been driven insane by her death, and in his grief he unleashed a psychic plague of madness upon the rest of the guardians. As their minds serve as a link to the pillars, the corruption spread to the land itself and the world began to rot. Ariel assures you that if you destroy the corrupted guardians and subsequently cleanse the circle, the balance of Nosgoth will be restored. You care not for the fate of Nosgoth or others and see no reason to partake in this heroic effort, but Ariel assures you that if you do so, your vampire curse will be lifted. Although her exact words are that there is no cure for death, only release. This is by no means a menial task, but you accept for this selfish reason and get to work. Your journey takes you through war-torn villages, cursed forests, haunted fortresses, and ancient catacombs, showcasing Nosgoth in all its decaying glory until you reach Nupraptor's retreat. Once a monastic stronghold, now warped into a grotesque, organic, almost living structure by Nupraptor's madness, this mountain sanctuary is basically a trap in itself. Luckily, you're a vampire with shape-shifting abilities, so Nupraptor's tricks don't have the same effect on you as they do on regular humans. With some effort, you finally reach the teleport rooms that lead to Nupraptor himself. As he reveals himself, you see that the mentalist who once was a brilliant healer and a philosopher was now a chair-bound deranged lunatic bent on spreading his misery and pain among the circle.
Come, Kain, come, share my pain.
Upon Ariel's death, his grief metastasized into a psychic scream that echoed through the circle's mystical bonds, crumbling the very foundation of Nosgoth, cracking the pillars and destabilizing the land. The saddest thing is that Nupraptor couldn't face the truth of Ariel being deceased. In his desperation, he entirely rejected reality and spiraled into insanity. His madness represents the inability to accept loss. But as I already said, this was the key though. The Guardians are empathically linked, and the corruption did not spread through violence, but through emotional and spiritual collapse. That was Hilden's sinister plan. Anyway, seeing Nupraptor, it was hard to believe that this completely broken shell of a man was once the cause of Nosgoth's downfall. But you came here to do a job with personal interests, so you proceed with it. Also, an important detail is that Nupraptor is joined by a knight that seems to be just a living suit of armor. But Nupraptor dismisses him with the desire to confront you alone. Not a good idea, as he meets his end under your blade. Ariel mentioned that each pillar will require a token from its deceased guardian in order to be restored, so taking Nupraptor's head seems like a fitting offering. You journey back to the pillars and place the head at the foot of the Mind One, and lo and behold, the corruption subsides as the cracks disappear, with the pillar restored to its healthy state. Death in the corrupted circle breathes life to the pillars, so next on the list is Paladin Malek, the protector of the Nine and the guardian of the Pillar of Conflict. The very hollow knight that stood by Nupraptor's side before he was dismissed. Okay, so in order to understand what Malek did, or rather did not do, to become nothing but a suit of armor, I have to go back to the Sarafan Brotherhood. As the Brotherhood waged their bloody crusade against the vampires, Malek was its commanding officer at the time, and under his leadership the Brotherhood would know their greatest victory yet, the murder of the last of the ancient vampires, the famous Janos Audron. The legend portrayed him as the greatest enemy of humankind, while in reality he was a kind and peaceful soul who was once the leader of the ancients when they were in charge of the pillars. However, the Sarafan did not care. They tracked Janos down and tore his still-beating heart from his chest. The heart itself did not wither, but rather remained an artifact with the power to resurrect vampires. The Circle of Nine held tight to it as they wanted to prevent anyone using it, until one day, ironically, Mortanius would be the one to use it to resurrect none other than you, as a vampire. You have the relic called the Heart of Darkness in your chest, a piece of an ancient vampire sustaining your unlife. Anyway, the savage murder of Janos Audron provoked the fury of a vampire named Vorador, who would not let this be, so he infiltrated the Sarafan stronghold and brutally slew 6 out of 9 guardians who sponsored the genocide of his people before Malek was able to confront him. In his rage, Vorador defeated Malek in combat but left him alive to drown in the failure of his sacred duty, which was above all else to protect the guardians. The remaining Circle members then decided to punish Malek for his inaction by fusing his soul to his armor, purging him of life and freedom, binding him to forever serve the Circle as a wraith. Naturally, as the Guardian of Death, Mortanius was the one to perform this ritual. 5 centuries later, Malek is recognized as the last of the Sarafan, ensuring no harm can ever come to the Guardians. That's why he was with Nupraptor when you reached him, and that makes him the priority. Also, I believe Nupraptor dismissed him when you arrived because deep down he wanted to die, he wanted the madness to end. Anyway, Malek's bastion laid on top of a cold, snowy mountain. Harsh terrain and bone-piercing wind ensured its isolation from people and vampires alike. However, your shape-shifting abilities allow you to take flight as a bat swarm and arrive at the stronghold hassle-free. The castle is naturally a gauntlet of cold steel and traps, fittingly representing what Malek had become. The bastion challenges your every step until you finally reach the throne room where Malek eagerly awaits to kill you. He is a formidable adversary and refuses to fall. Each time you destroy him, the armor reassembles itself and a new round of tiring combat ensues until finally, Malek summons a magical tidal wave of unrivaled destruction which you barely evade by teleporting out of the room. It seems Malek won't go down easily, so you consult with Ariel about the next step. She tells you to go east and implore the help of the wise Oracle of Nosgoth on what to do. The Oracle, however, is also one of the Circle members, specifically the Guardian of the Pillar of Time. He resides among the complex network of mountain caves north of Termagant Forest, so as you continue your journey, Mortanius' voice starts messing with your head, again saying how the number of pawns in the game rises, but urges you to find the true player, meaning the orchestrator of your death. Because let's not forget that that very fact set you on this whole journey in the first place. Ariel's promise of vampirism curse being lifted came second. Anyway, as you circumnavigate these complex caves, you find a museum-like room with artifacts, such as replica of Malek's armor and a bloody guillotine. It seems this oracle was obsessed with the Sarafan Crusades and the purge of the vampires. This is very important as it will come to play by the end, so bear with me. A sorcerer-type looking man by the name of Moebius greets you beyond the museum.
A nobleman, seeking wisdom. Death has taught you well.
Enough philosophy, I seek answers.
You waste no time on pleasantries and only demand answers on how to destroy Malek for good, and Moebius seems more than willing to give you some. He tells you of Malek's punishment and points you deep into the swamps of the Black Forest where the mansion of the very vampire named Vorador stood, the very same Vorador who defeated Malek once before. Also, Moebius speaks very cryptically of time and someone called the Nemesis, foreshadowing a lot of events, but in your arrogance and bloodthirst, you don't stop to think why Moebius is actually keen on helping you defeat Malek, as they are both members of the Circle of Nine. But then again, Nupraptor did corrupt their minds. Even so, Moebius had a plan of his own, and this is where the Legacy of Kain series gets twisted beyond time and place. This is all I'm gonna say for now as Moebius disappears, but the crucial thing to remember is his ramblings about time and the defeat of the Nemesis. Left with more questions than answers, you pave your path to Vorador's mansion through forests and marshes in hopes he'll see you as a kin rather than a foe. As every other thing in this world, Vorador's mansion is a hazard, but also a buffet galore, with succulent humans chained to the walls for one to feast in time of need. It seems that Vorador was particularly cruel and rejoiced in his power to inflict harm on others, and as you step into the dining room, your assumption is confirmed. This decadent and hedonistic vampire fortunately greets you as one of his own, offering you a chalice of fresh blood, encouraging you to embrace the blessing of vampirism. As you drink, he reminisces of his victory over the Circle of Nine, recounting how finally humans are nothing more than cattle to feed on. As cruel as Vorador may seem, he did suffer greatly in the Sarafan purges where he lost his friends, family and lovers, so in hindsight it's not hard to understand his burning hatred for the Sarafan. It is also important to say that Vorador was the first human ever to be turned by the original winged ancient vampires, specifically Janos Audron. The very Janos Audron whose murder prompted Vorador to attack the Circle. You see, Janos was the one who found a way to turn humans into vampires, thus ensuring the survival of the race when all the ancients perished. This also makes Vorador one of the oldest vampires in Nosgoth's history, who's seen and partook in his fair share of brutality. But as of late, he does not concern himself with the affairs of humans. He just indulges in hedonistic behavior locked away in his mansion. Oddly enough, seeing as your youth and arrogance do amuse him, he gives you his magical signet ring to summon him in the time of need. Now that you're safely inducted into the Vampire Hall of Fame, you return to Ariel to see what she makes of this soap. She says that the easiest way to confront Malek would be to force his hand, that is, lure him out by threatening those he swore to protect. She suggests the unholy trio of guardians, Anerkrot, the Guardian of States, Bane, the Guardian of Nature, and the Jewel, the Guardian of Energy, who in their madness secluded themselves north in the mountains and fashioned a warped land of abominable creatures, abundant lava and corrosive energy. This piece of grotesque and putrid paradise was called Dark Eden. As you reach the outskirts of your destination, you witness a magical barrier surrounding all of Dark Eden, twisting anything alive inside into mutated monsters. But curiously enough, it does not affect you, probably because you're not actually alive. Anyway, after slicing your way through these abominations, you finally make it to the epicenter of this vile experiment, a tall tower with magical energy beam resonating from its top. You enter only to find more abominations, along with a twisted arcane laboratory used to birth this devouring hell. You explore the place and reach this ungodly trio.
Not one, but three. Jewel the Energist, Bane the Druid, and Anerkrot the Alchemist. How considerate of them to hasten my search.
Anerkrot, the Alchemist, has no time for bickering, so he instantly summons Malek to his aid and disappears.
Don't be ridiculous. Malek to our aid.
Damn you, Alchemist!
Perfect opportunity to give him a rematch, so you summon Vorador to your aid.
Vengeance. Vengeance for my eternity of suffering.
Whelp! As if you knew what eternity was!
Malek and Vorador exchange pleasantries while you further pursue Bane and the Jewel. They're both tricky bastards, but no match for your vampiric abilities, so a bit of cunning goes a long way and ensures their demise. You collect Bane's antlers and the Jewel's cloak and return to the previous room, where you see Malek's armor on the ground. Vorador has laid him to rest for good. You pick up his helmet and hurry back to the Pillars. Once there, you place your offerings and the Pillars of Conflict, Nature and Energy get restored. Ariel says that the next to fall should be Azimuth, the Planer, guardian of the Pillar of Dimension, who resides in her hometown of Avernus. This matriarch ran the city as a religious autocracy with a secret cult at its heart, but as you arrive, it doesn't seem all that secret anymore. The streets are going up in flames and are overrun by these brutal demons summoned from an unholy dimension. Azimuth unleashed hell upon her own people as she barred herself in the city's cathedral that stood as an untouched monolith at the heart of this dimensional mashup. Ariel warned you will have to quote-unquote rise and fall in order to defeat Azimuth, so you explore the cathedral and find gateways to two other planes. One resides at the top, resembling a heaven-like dimension, while the other resides on the bottom of the cathedral, resembling hell. Now, in this heaven section, a crucial event happens. What seems like an ordinary item pickup actually echoes through time and space. What you come across is a curved blade called the Soul Reaver, a legendary weapon forgotten by time designed to feed on the blood of those it strikes. This enchanted sword was forged by Vorador at the bequest of the ancient vampires, and its purpose was to destroy the vampire-prophesized adversary, the Hilden Lord. Now, this sword is stored in a pocketed dimension of this section, and Lady Azimuth is unaware of its presence in the cathedral. We will talk about who put it here and why soon enough, as the Soul Reaver is a major story element in this series, but for now, you take it, as it's an upgrade to your arsenal. This symbolized the rise Ariel was talking about, so now for the fall. Through the basement you enter a hellish plane where you find an interesting sight to behold. Malek's skeleton ripped clean of meat and skin. This is the very site Mortanius performed the ritual at, extracting Malek's essence and fusing it into an enchanted armor. Behind the ritual site is a wraith armor ready for taking. Forged in the most impure of ways, tempered with torment of tortured souls, it exists on the border of dimension and allows you to mitigate your taken damage with your magic pool. The fall is also done, so you head over to confront Lady Azimuth. As you find her, you see she'd gone insane.
What's this? I had not even realized the blade and the raiment were here. You wear those trinkets well, Kain. But I do believe that they would look better on me.
Delusions of ruling over Nosgoth with a demon army have clouded what little reason she had left, so you get to work. After dispatching her minions, Lady Azimuth proves no challenge to the Reaver as one swing turns her into splatter art, effectively ending her reign of horror over Avernus. You then pick up her necklace called the Third Eye, which allowed her sight into other realms, a gift bestowed by the Pillar of Dimension, which is now restored as it reclaims it back. An important thing to say is that before you left the Cathedral of Avernus, you found a curious item concealed in the back of the Grand Hall. Ariel explains how this is Moebius' time-streaming device, which was stolen by Lady Azimuth, who in her insanity tried to summon demons from various points in history. Ariel tells you to take care of this device as it will quote-unquote deliver you in time. More problems arise as Ariel points out that the legions of the Nemesis are coming from the north, obliterating the whole land, and the restoration of the Pillars is meaningless if Nosgoth is to fall. Here, we can see that Moebius' random babble back in the Oracle Cave was not madness at all, but rather foreshadowing of the events to transpire. He constantly mentioned time and the Nemesis, and now you're facing both. Okay, so let's pause here for a second as this information seems to come a bit out of nowhere. Along with the Pillars issue, another one was brewing this whole time. The so-called Nemesis, who now poses an immediate threat, is actually King William, ironically called the Just, who was once a kind and benevolent king of the North, beloved by his people. During time, as his influence and armies grew, he slowly turned from a gentle king into a ruthless, power-hungry tyrant, bent on ruling the whole of Nosgoth. Or so the history says. Known as the Nemesis now, his legion leaves a trail of destruction anywhere they pass. Ariel implores you to go to the town of Willendorf as they are the last bastion of hope and rally its forces to confront the Nemesis before all is lost. Not all too happy with your side quest, you reluctantly oblige, seeing as there is no other choice. South of Avernus lay the city of Willendorf, also known as the Lion's Den, ruled by King Ottmar. Your job now is to convince him to meet the Nemesis head-on, but as you arrive, the king seems to be in mourning and this foolish peasant tries to assert some frail authority but fails miserably.
Out of my way, peasant! The stench of the fields hangs over you like a pall.
The king sees no one. He is in mourning for the princess.
He'll be in mourning for his kingdom soon, and he'll mourn for you even sooner if you don't get out of my way!
Long story short, this human-sized puppet in front of you is his daughter, who fell prey to the madness of a soul-stealing sorcerer named Elzevir. King Ottmar organized a doll-making contest for his daughter's birthday with a royal favor as a prize. The sorcerer Elzevir posed as a doll maker and won by creating a doll of unmatched beauty. All he wanted in return was a lock of the princess's hair, which was apparently enough for him to perform the soul-stealing ritual, turning the young lady into a lifeless puppet. The king is so desperate, he is actually offering his kingdom in return for his daughter's soul. This actually comes at a very good moment for you, because if you manage to save her, Ottmar will have no choice but to oblige your request. Court rumors point you to an underground passage that supposedly leads to Elzevir's lair. Also, now that you're around Willendorf, you're met with high activity of Nemesis troops, raided villages with burnt homes, displayed and piled corpses, and all that comes with a classic pillage. After some swordplay with the Legion, you find Elzevir's house. Once inside, the house actually looks quite normal, but you have to contend with some murderous ragdolls before finally reaching the doll maker himself.
So, Ottmar sent you to kill me, eh? I can smell him on you. Or is that the stench of the grave?
Elzevir is pretty cocky for someone who's about to fight a vampire, so you successfully test your decapitation skill on him.
What an odd little man.
In his bedroom, you find the very doll infused with the princess's soul, so you grab it along with his head and return to Ottmar. The king's sorcerers are able to fuse the soul back with the princess's body, and Ottmar offers you the rule over Willendorf as a reward. You care not for Willendorf, so you decline and explain the Nemesis situation, requesting the king's army at your disposal. Ottmar agrees, and you head out to meet the plight of Nosgoth head-on. The Legion of Nemesis vastly outnumbers the troops of King Ottmar, but nevertheless, the king fights with vigor of a young man and is hell-bent on victory. Your eyes, however, were set on a man in particular, William the Just, the Nemesis himself. As you scour the battlefield, it becomes evident Ottmar's army won't last much longer, and amidst the chaos and horror of battle, King Ottmar himself meets the pointy end. All hope is lost as the remaining troops scatter and the Legion swoops in like a tidal wave, cutting down everything in its path. As this starts to seem a point of no return even for you, a strange sound sparks your curiosity as the time-streaming device in your possession activates and launches you to some place. All of a sudden, the horde screams are replaced with silence and blood-soaked ground becomes fresh green grass. In all this madness, now you see the time-streaming device laying broken at your feet, so you have nothing but to explore a bit. You realize you're at the gates of King William's court, and you're not a welcome guest, so you hack your path all the way to the Grand Hall, and this is where it becomes very peculiar. You see Moebius, the Guardian of Time, giving William the Soul Reaver blade while telling him that a vampire is coming to kill him. Although a bit distrustful, William accepts this gift and heeds Moebius' words with utmost seriousness. You also see a war room with the map of Nosgoth and William's plan for expansion and realize you're thrown back in time 50 years to be precise. As you try to leave, William himself crosses your path, wielding the Soul Reaver much like yourself.
Ah yes, the vampire. Moebius told me you would come.
However, the Reaver takes a huge toll on William wielding it, so with one precise strike you seize your opportunity and end him before he could even become the Nemesis and lay his plague of war upon the land. William the Just is no more, and just when you think you're stuck, you find another time-streaming device which allows you to return back to your respective timeline. This all seems very unusual and orchestrated, so as you are teleported back, you realize the land has changed. The court of the Nemesis now laid in ruin with the battlefield you escaped gone. The peasants no longer feared you but actively hunted you. It seems history has been rewritten. Anyway, you hear cheering coming from the town square, and as you approach, the truth comes crashing like a boulder. You're just in time to see Moebius giving the anti-vampire chant with Vorador no less helplessly mounted in the guillotine. The mob cheers as the sharp blade falls down, brutally severing the head of one of the strongest and most famous vampires in history, effectively ending the influence and rule of the same. This is the moment you realize you have been nothing but a pawn in Oracle's web of deceit. As the guardian of the Pillar of Time, Moebius possessed a limited form of omniscience, aka foreknowledge of all past and future events in Nosgoth's time stream. He was capable of interacting with time travelers in respect to their personal chronologies, regardless of his own place in time. He could also travel between eras using various means, so even before the corruption of the Pillars, he selfishly used his abilities to satiate his ever-burning hatred of vampires, because Moebius was first and foremost a devout servant of the Elder God, while posing as a benign guardian of time. As I said before, since the vampires were ripped from the Elder God's Wheel of Fate by the Hilden blood curse, the Elder God saw them as nothing more than a plague upon mankind that prevented the wheel from turning. Moebius was also one of the original sponsors of the Sarafan and commanded Malek's loyalty. He was also one of the guardians who survived at the Sarafan stronghold when Vorador exacted his vengeance upon the Circle. Remember how I said that in your bloodthirsty selfishness you didn't stop to think why he was actually helping you? Well, this is why. To purge the land of all the vampires was his plan all along. By manipulating you into killing William the Just before he became the Nemesis, allowed Moebius to put the final seed of hatred towards vampires into the heart of man, and unite all of Nosgoth against the very same, effectively instigating the final Sarafan purges. Like I said, the growing tension and distrust already existed due to several factors. The crusade was already there, but this was the final nail in the coffin. A beloved and a kind king mercilessly struck down by a vampire for no apparent reason. And now, for the paradox of it all. William the Just became the Nemesis under the influence of Moebius as well. For years Moebius poisoned his mind with delusions of power and grandeur, prompting him to embark on his conquest to rule all of Nosgoth. So, basically, one timeline cannot exist without the other. In order for the Sarafan Crusade to happen, William the Just has to be killed before he becomes the Nemesis. But in order for you to go back in time to kill him, he has to become the Nemesis, hence the paradox. Also, one of the crucial things for this to happen was the Reaver convergence. The enchanted Soul Reaver blade had to clash with itself to create a temporal paradox and allow the time stream to be manipulated. You finding the Reaver in the Avernus Cathedral was not a coincidence. Moebius placed it there for you to pick up, as it was the key to changing the past. That is exactly why we see Moebius giving the very same Soul Reaver to King William 50 years ago, with the warning that a vampire is coming to kill him, ensuring your confrontation and the Reaver convergence, effectively changing the timeline and succeeding in the vampire purge. Because the moment Vorador gets beheaded, you are the last standing vampire in Nosgoth. Moebius then rallies the hyped, power-drunken crowd to attack you, but they fail miserably, prompting him to try to take care of you. Moebius is a tricky bastard, teleporting around and even spawning a copy of yours truly who you have to fight, but all this shenanigans is soon brought to an end as you utilize the Reaver and introduce decapitation into the match.
Aye, you have seen my plan, vampire, as I've seen your destiny. The future says you die.
But I am dead. As are you.
Moebius is no more, so after throwing a one-liner at his corpse, you return to the Pillars with his hourglass as a token of reparation. Once there, you're welcomed by the committee of the remaining Guardians, Mortanius and Anarkroth the Alchemist, who escaped after summoning Malek back in Dark Eden. You sneak behind a pillar and hear them bickering about what Mortanius had actually done. And this is the moment you realize you have been a double pawn in this whole scheme fest. Your quest to find the orchestrator of your death comes to a close as you realize Mortanius is the one. He himself paid those brigands to kill you so he could resurrect you as the undead, making the New Balance Guardian a vampire again. That was his intervention. Realizing his error in helping to exterminate the ancient vampires and ravaged by the guilt of Ariel's murder, his atonement plan was to put the Pillars back into the hands of their rightful guardians again, vampires. So the Hilden prison remains locked and Nosgoth remains stable. To achieve this, he counted on Ariel's unknowing help. That is, to set you on the path to exterminate the corrupted human guardians, thus restoring the Pillars and creating a master reset. Anarkroth, however, is appalled by this, as he believes the corrupted Circle members are to do as they will, twisting the narrative that the Circle exists for them, not the other way around. Mortanius, on the other hand, understood the madness Nupraptor's mental breakdown inflicted upon the world, leading to failure in the Guardian's sacred duty. This whole thing is exactly what I meant when I said the humans could not bear the responsibility of the Pillars. Their minds were just not resilient enough. They were easily manipulated and feeble and weak compared to their vampiric co-inhabitants. Anyway, Anarchroth attacks Mortanius, who easily murders him in self-defense. Seeing Mortanius is the last one standing, you make your presence known and assure him he will not escape his fate. Mortanius willingly accepts this is to be his final stand, as it was his plan all along. He knows he too must die, but says that one more has to fall after his death, as the Balance Pillar still stands corrupted. Although keen on dying, Mortanius puts up a fight because he has to be sure you are worthy of this task, especially of what comes after his death. Mortanius sends waves of his undead minions at you, but you prevail, finally striking him down. Instead of dying, the grip the Hilden had over him turns him into a savage beefcake beast, so you're up for another round.
You thought yourself a king, when in fact you were a pawn. You have served me well, Kain.
I serve no one.
Indeed. Such narrow vision. Don't you see? My silencing of Ariel and its calculated repercussions is but the first act in my theater of ground ignore. You are the tragic hero. Play on, little vampire. Play on.
Fey Victus!
In this adrenaline-inducing madness, you pick up Mortanius' death orb and Anarchroth's scales and offer them to their respective pillars. They heal, but nothing happens as the Balance Pillar still stands corrupted. It's hard to focus with this beefcake constantly hurling at you, so you pull out the Soul Reaver. One fierce slash is enough, and as the demon disintegrates into nothingness, reality comes crashing down for the third time. You realize you have been triple played. You are the last pillar. Remember how I said earlier that whenever a Guardian dies a new one is assigned at birth? Well, the moment Ariel died, a child was born in the town of Korhagen, a child by the name of Kain. You realize now you are Ariel's succeeding Guardian. Upon your birth, fate has marked you as the Scion of Balance, and your death as a vampiric Guardian will liberate Nosgoth of its corruption and reset the cycle, putting the pillars in the hands of the vampires again. There is no cure for your condition. I mean, there is technically, Ariel wasn't lying. The curse of vampirism will be lifted because you'll be dead. Everyone played their part well, leading you up to this very point where you get to choose the fate of Nosgoth. Your decision will either heal or further corrupt the land. As the moment draws near, you remember Vorador's words, those being that vampires are like gods and should rightfully act like so. You decide you're not going to be a pawn of the circle, so you embrace the gift of vampirism and refuse to sacrifice yourself, forcing an immediate explosive collapse of the pillars as they shatter and topple, turning dark grey. Also, this act ensured Ariel cannot be released, forcing her spirit to eternally be bound to this rotting monument of her failure. Also, this means the lock to the Hilden prison is now broken, with you completely unaware of this threat. Like I said in the beginning, humans were oblivious to the true purpose of the pillars. This will create some serious problems very soon. It's also important to say that this is where another paradox ensues. If you did sacrifice yourself, the pillars would be healed, but seeing you're the last standing vampire, the cycle would again choose human guardians as they're the only race left in Nosgoth, making Mortanius' plan invalid. So how does this actually work? Well, it works the same way it did with the Nemesis. A quote-unquote different path has to be taken for the envisioned one to be laid. The restoration of the vampires only becomes possible because you refuse to sacrifice yourself, thus keeping the vampire race alive by siring new fledglings and finding the way to restore the pillars without sacrificing yourself at this point. This is the genius of Blood Omen. Your whole quest is the hero's journey inverted. Your selfish decisions actually prompt you to do the so-called right thing. As a pompous, apathetic nobleman, you were actually a perfect candidate for Moebius's and Mortanius's and even Ariel's plan to unfold, although she doesn't know it yet. Anyway, you take your throne at the foot of the broken world and decide to reshape Nosgoth in your image. You would reign over a millennium before fate would allow your true purpose to unfold. And there you have it, the full story of Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain. Definitely one of the greatest stories out there, so be sure to subscribe for the sequels and see you in the next one. Cheers!